Hi, and welcome to the Days Gone podcast. I'm Claire Weaver, a screenwriter, author, and Days Gone fan, and this podcast is a place to discuss the game in all its glory, share my opinions, both popular and unpopular, and listen to me fangirl over one of the best games ever made. There will be spoilers ahead, so continue at your own risk. Welcome to the Freak Show. Just a couple reminders before we get started today. Every morning at 7:30 a.m. Pacific time, you can watch me live stream my Survival 2 Fresh Start playthrough. I take on hordes, talk shit about rippers, and lay waste to ambush camps all before I've had my morning cup of coffee. You can find me on my YouTube channel, just search for Days Gone Podcast. And on Tuesdays, I join Spornicus Rex on his YouTube channel for a collaborative live stream playthrough of Days Gone. He goes into advanced gameplay tactics and strategy, and I discuss the story, the characters, and all the amazing details of the game. You can find us live on the Spornicus Rex YouTube channel every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Pacific. Today's episode is something I've talked about many, many times on the podcast, but never before have I had the opportunity to discuss this with an actual licensed professional. Of course, I'm talking about mental health in Days Gone. Joining me is licensed mental health professional Zach Geiser. He is an LPCC, which is a licensed professional clinical counselor, and an LPAT, which is a licensed professional art therapist. Zach, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well. Thank you for having me on the show. I'm very pleased to be here. This is the first time I've done something like this, so it's an experience for sure.
I'm so glad that you reached out to me because this is, like I said, it's something that I've talked about a lot, but I am not a licensed professional in mental health. So I'm really psyched to talk to you about all of this and kind of get into this. I want to start, first of all, I introduced you as a licensed professional art therapist. That sounds really cool. What is that?
Yeah, it's a growing field. I don't think many people readily know about it, but I'll try and give my best working definition of what it is. So a licensed professional art therapist is a real therapist. They can see clients, they can bill for services. But art therapy is a form of counseling where the artwork is almost its own person in the session. It's not about how well somebody draws or paints or sculpts, but as the art therapist, we can kind of guide clients into making pieces of artwork that focus on certain themes about their life, perhaps. We do this through a variety of modalities, and we can get people to talk about the different themes that come up in their artwork, which often reflect on events that have happened in their own lives. So, the American Art Therapy Association is a national organization. They kind of define art therapy as engaging the mind, body, and spirit in ways that are distinct from verbal articulation alone. Art therapy actually encompasses the kinesthetic and sensory aspects of our person.
Mm-hmm.
It also uses perceptual and symbolic opportunities that allow people to communicate in ways other than simply words. Which is a big thing, especially for kids or those who have a hard time just putting into words what is going on in their lives, which can affect all of us. It can be very symbolic. I don't know how familiar you are with Carl Jung, but he used a lot of symbolism in his therapy and is almost a grandfather sort of figure of using the symbolic to get people to look at deeper levels of their own personalities and consciousness.
It also sounds really kind of fun and not like when we think about therapy, sometimes it sounds just kind of very upsetting and very not something that would be a pleasant experience, but creating art's like a good way to get into it.
Yeah, one of the most fun experiences I had actually was going through school for this and doing some of the art therapy myself in a group setting, because then we can talk about it as a group afterwards and we can see what's going on in our lives and how other people relate, or maybe things other people bring up. We realize we're not the only ones going through that, and there's some benefit to sharing that.
Yeah. It's all about communication, I guess. In a way, I wonder if you could sort of look at the creators of Days Gone and be like, is Days Gone their art therapy? Are they telling us something about themselves?
I wouldn't put it out in the realm of impossibility. I think the things that we create, especially art, and I consider Days Gone a form of art, just because of all the the intelligence, the creativity, the passion that went into making this. Definitely, I would think the creators put some aspects of themselves into the game.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm a screenwriter and specifically like horror and sci-fi, and damn, I mean, everything I write is just riddled with my own issues and my own problems and my own thoughts. I mean, you can't help, as a creative person, you can't help but put yourself into what you create.
I know it all too well. And it's
Yeah.
awesome that you specialize in sci-fi and horror. Those are my two favorite genres as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're the best genres. Let's just call it as it
Yeah,
is.
yeah. Not everyone knows it, but it's undeniable.
So before we get into the specifics of Days Gone and the details of the game, I do want to just touch on mental health in general in the
hmm
real world. Can you talk a little bit about some of the everyday issues that people face and what exactly the purview is of a mental health professional?
Well, let me first just kind of give a broad definition of mental health, just so we're all on the same page and we know what we're discussing. The definition that I've come up with is mental health is how a person thinks, feels, and behaves. It's the quality of one's ability to manage stress in relation to their ability to be functional within the context of their culture. So, in maybe a more layman's terms, how well somebody is managing themselves in relation to the world around them. And I give that definition because there are different cultures in this world, and some things fly in one culture that don't fly in another, whether it's concepts of spirituality, religion, or just behavior, within a relationship, family dynamic. So,
I mean, speaking as a Brit, we have
mm.
a lot of like stiff upper lip, soldier on, don't mention anything that might be
Mm,
troubling you. That is our baseline. That's how you're culturally supposed to be.
yeah, yeah,
Versus, I live in America and here it's a lot more wear your heart on your sleeve. Be a lot more
yeah.
open with what you're feeling and what you're thinking.
hmm Very true. I mean, you said it, not me, about British culture, but yeah, I think some parts of the world, some groups of people do have stereotypes, and that's or generalizations, and that's kind of perpetuated. I don't know how we get to those points necessarily as a group of people, but yeah, there are different groups of people that are more relaxed about certain subjects than others.
Mm,
So you talked about how mental health or what are some common problems that manifest in everyday lives, right?
yeah.
I guess we could talk about the positive aspects of mental health as well as some of the more that are unpleasant, because I think there is a balance there. I'll
Hmm.
start with the unpleasant so we can end on a positive note there. Some of the unpleasant things that come up in mental health, things that put pressure on us that we have a hard time balancing in regards to our own standards. So I'm a pretty punctual person. If I don't get to some place on time, it stresses me out, right? I get angry at the other drivers on the road, perhaps,
Hmm.
or the weather that's slowing me down, things that I can't control. And if I don't put it into that perspective in terms of knowing what I can and cannot control, I can get pretty emotionally worked up. Arguments among friends or spouses obviously can affect one's mental health, especially if grudges are held, if we don't work through them or we're unwilling to. Mental health obviously spans from the very little to the more serious topics, loss of loved ones, major changes in one's lifestyle, um, having to move, relocate. Can be a good thing if a parent has to relocate for a job opportunity. Alas, we know it disrupts the children's kind of foundations and some of their friendships that are very important at a young age. Yeah, I mean, there's an endless list, right, where of the human experience there in terms of what causes stress in people's lives.
Yeah.
But there are things that improve our mental health as well. And like I said, positive, healthy friendships, people that validate us, that help us feel accepted for who we are, flaws and all. That's a big aspect. Having hope for the future, for things improving, knowing or believing that there are some things within our control that we can make a difference in our lives and in our society or the world at large.
Hmm.
Finding purpose and meaning in one's life on a more broad sense is almost necessary. I think it is an integral part of having good quality mental health.
Yeah. I find it really interesting how people in general, just the idea of our species, how social we are and how influenced we are by our connections to other people. I mean, you talk about a lot of the stresses and a lot of the positive things to get from interactions with other people. So whether it's like you have an argument with someone or someone validates you in some way and makes you feel good about who you are. And it's like we're all, from a psychological standpoint, we're all very dependent on other people and the world around us and how that affects our internal stability. It's fascinating.
Claire, I'll say that's a really insightful comment, and I don't think I planned on bringing it up till the end, but you hit the nail on the head that it's my personal experience in my own life and with working with hundreds of people is that it comes down to relationships. Relationships either on an individual level, our relationship with groups like our whole family, right? There could be many people, generations as well. Relationships between ourselves and our neighbors, our community, other people of a similar nationality, right? You can expand it into different rings, but yeah, that I think has the largest influence on our mental health is our relationships and the quality.
Yeah. Do I get a gold star for that?
I will give you a gold star and a free therapy session, but you sound like you have your head screwed on straight already. So.
I sound like I have all the answers. I actually don't. I mean, that sounds like the perfect seg into our actual topic of the day. I mean, you talk about relationships. I mean, Days Gone
Oh yeah,
is all about relationships. It's all about the brotherhood between Deacon and Boozer, the love that Deacon has for Sarah and Sarah has for Deacon, the balance of the world between the different camps and the balance in the world between the humans and the freaks and the all the
yeah.
infected. It's this dynamic world that is all about relationships. So, I mean, let's get into it because that's the fun stuff. That's what we're here to talk about.
Absolutely,
So
absolutely.
I say all the time on the podcast that Days Gone is like a study of trauma and grief and coping mechanisms or outright avoidance tactics.
It is, yeah.
So let's start with just the definition. What do we mean when we use words like trauma, grief, PTSD?
Yeah. So trauma, without necessarily meaning post-traumatic stress disorder (PTSD), because PTSD is a specific diagnosis, but we're talking about trauma as just a general concept. It's an emotionally distressing response to what we could objectively call a terrible event, and that's according to the American Psychological Association. There, so it's very subjective in terms of what we consider trauma in our own lives, right? We'll get into the different traumas that some of the characters in the game have faced, but we as people in real life, we likely have all experienced one or more event that match this definition. In fact, I've never met anyone that hasn't. Honestly, everyone's had a worst day of their life, and that sits in our memory, whether it's largely impactful or just a passing memory of the past. A former supervisor of mine actually referred to this as small t trauma. Some things that most people have encountered at some point in their life, but maybe it's not world changing, it's not character defining, but they're things that stick out in our memory, right, as pivotal moments in our development. What I consider large T trauma is probably more in line with what comes to mind for the average person. Surviving a tornado, earthquake, robbery, assault, maybe even breaking a bone. And I have to believe the typical person would consider a freakier style apocalyptic event to be traumatic, right? It certainly upheaves our modern way of living. I don't know if you want me to talk a little bit or continue talking a little bit more about defining trauma and the background of that, or if we kind of want to go more into the characters right away.
I mean, yeah, we can get into it. My next question was really going to be talking about the world. I mean, you bring up the idea that most people would consider a freaker apocalypse or whatever we're calling it, a post-society world as being big T trauma. The world of our characters is just on a good day for them, really highly stressful. And this is, if you're living in a camp and it's not being attacked by marauders or
Hmm.
freaks or, internal conflict or anything like that, even on a good day, you've lived for 2 years in this extremely stressful environment. What does that do to a person? I mean, that's just ongoing, continual, low-level stress of where's food gonna come from? When are you
Yeah,
allowed to rest?
yeah,
Who can you trust? When can you let your guard down? It's crazy to think about just existing on a normal day in something like that.
right. I mean, when I played through the game, that was one of my first, coming from this background, that was one of the first thoughts I had, the things I noticed. I was like, how are these people dealing with this? Like, how would I deal with this if I was in this situation? My thoughts, I don't know. Other professionals might have a different opinion, of course, but the issues they face are much more simple than what we deal with right now.
Hmm.
Like you said, it's where do I get food? How do I survive? Where do I get gas for my vehicle? Very basic kind of concepts. I mean, of course, they do deal with relationships between the different camps and all the drama that stems from that, but I feel like that's almost like sprinkles on top. That's not absolutely necessary for their survival.
Right.
But I would think the wear and tear of just the daily grind of having to go out hunting and watching your back, or having to trust this person that you only met maybe a few days ago to watch your back, that
Mm.
could be very unnerving. I think a lot of people would be on edge. It activates a different part of our brain, I'll just say, than maybe the part that you and I are firing up right now by having civil discourse and discussing something that we enjoy.
Mhm.
It plays up the nervous system. It's going to be on high alert, right? It's playing on that the mammalian part of the brain where it's all about survival, and keeping your emotions in check. I think that's why people end up joining some of the camps that maybe they're not the most comfortable with,
Mhm.
but it's a safe haven. And that's much more easier to put up with Copeland's crap than have to worry about where you're going to eat your next meal or if you're going to survive the night.
And also thinking about joining someone like Copeland's camp. I mean, Tucker's camp is a different animal because it's basically a slave camp. But someone like Copeland's camp, it's only really probably, I would imagine, Copeland that's the nut job. You're gonna join and you're gonna very quickly find people that are like, "Oh, yeah, we know Copeland's full of shit, Second Amendment and all of that." It's like, "Ugh, whatever." We just smile and nod and,
Right.
you find camaraderie, I think, even in circumstances like that, because you naturally are gonna join other people who or you're gonna find other people that think the same way, and even if there's, like, one standout nut job, everyone else is almost gonna bond better because you can bond together over laughing at Copeland.
Absolutely. That's one of the things too in this game, or in this, if this event were to happen in our world, of course it would stress people out and deconstruct many people's lives. But I do think if we have a common enemy, people can look past other differences and kind of unite over a common cause.
Yeah.
Uh, and that would be a big thing, a big positive, big plus to keep people from killing each other entirely, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it goes back to what we were saying about the psychology of just the human mind, how we naturally need to belong with other people. We need to connect. That inner world is influenced by who we're around. And yeah, I think it's just like you say, it's a natural state that we would find ourselves in, that we would band together. And it's kind of what humans do best.
Yeah, actually, as a species or an organism, evolutionarily speaking, that's how we became top of the food chain.
Hmm.
We aren't the fastest creatures. We don't have thick hides. We don't have large fangs. So it's like, how did we beat or overcome lions and rhinos and crocodiles? And I think it's because we work together as groups.
Hmm.
We have all of our different skills and talents, and that's why relationships are so important, and that's why I think relationships cause the most stress in people's lives, because they are so important.
Right, right.
We have to have those ducks in a row.
Yeah, also, we learn from each other. I mean, think about all of the
Hmm.
knowledge we have. we're standing on the shoulders of everyone who's gone before us.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
know, you mentioned Carl Jung. You know, he's taught you various things about your profession, and influenced so many people in your profession. You know, with me, like, I didn't just come to screenwriting and just invent it. Like, it's cinema
Right.
storytelling has been around literally for millennia.
Yeah.
And the stories and the narratives that I create, people understand them because they also know millennia worth of storytelling rules and, I guess, build a collective understanding, and we know how to use that. We know the value of it.
Yeah. Storytelling, man. I think it's probably one of the most important aspects of what has helped us grow, technology wise, and just
Mhm.
keep it together as a species. And I think that's what I like about Days Gone so much, is that it's an excellent story.
Yeah.
Um, looking past just how much time and effort things look in the gameplay, it's the story, man. The actors that they chose are just on point for the different
Mhm.
characters. Like, I couldn't have cast anybody different. They were really getting into their roles as well. And just how it unfolds, that just kept me on the edge of my seat, for the first half of the game, not knowing if Sarah was alive or not, and then even finding out that she is, and everything that unfolds there is
Mhm.
just, holy cow, this is pretty believable. So let's I'm going to jump right into the characters, because
Yeah, no,
I
let's
don't I
get
don't
into
want to
it.
get ahead of myself, and there's certain things that pop up in the game, yeah, that I would love for us to talk about.
Sure. Yeah, let's do it. I mean, of course, starting with our boy Deacon.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know in one of your previous podcasts, it might have been the one actually right before this, it was mentioned that there are signs of trauma or PTSD that show up in Deacon's mannerisms or the things that he says.
Mhm.
The first thing that popped into my head is, right in the beginning of the game, when you're going through that tunnel with Boozer,
Mm.
he has an impulsive aggression and a lack of regard for his safety.
Yeah.
He's very focused on his wife. Obviously, we know after playing through the game, he doesn't admit that. So he like represses that feeling of loss and sadness, and it comes out in something that's probably much safer for him, which is anger and violence.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, we see him grieving over the death of his wife by visiting her tombstone. At least at that point, we're not sure if she's alive or not. But that's his way of dealing and coping with that. Is, you know, well, if she was alive, she could hear what I'm saying, and if she's not here now, I'm going to say it anyway, in the hope that maybe she can hear it in the afterlife, and it at least gets that pressure out of his head. He's able to voice his thoughts and kind of untangle that knot of emotion that he has going on.
Right.
I have a question. Doesn't he kind of indicate that he regrets, like, selling people to the work camps at some point, or there's a backstory there?
Yes, yeah, so it's kinda hard to pick up on. It took me, like, 2 or 3 playthroughs to really kinda get Deacon's redemption arc, because it
Mm-hmm.
it almost, the story is so apparently about him finding Sarah, and yet his redemption, he actually is, I've described it before as being, he's one step away from the abyss. He is about
Mm-hmm.
to, he's kinda lost his humanity, and
Mm-hmm.
he's been selling people to the work camp, to Tucker's camp, and he got kicked out of Lost Lake for it. And he's still, I mean, he goes and gets Lisa for Tuck. She says to him, "There's a teenage girl, go get her." And he's like, "Okay." I mean, what else is he getting a teenage girl for? Like, it's not it's not for the teenage girl's sake.
Yeah.
It's not that. It's, I'm a work camp, I need able-bodied people. Oh, I found one. Go get her for me. I need her to come here and dig, or whatever it is she's going to be used for. And he does it, and it's through the story with Lisa that he starts to realize, oh shit, I am about to completely lose all humanity, and I
Mm-hmm.
need to not do that. I need to rethink my actions, rethink where I'm at. And it's through that storyline that he actually starts to connect again with other people, because he goes and gets her the, as I call it, the useless rock, the thunder egg that she likes, that she collected with her dad when she was a kid, and
Ah,
it's like, it's a useless piece of garbage, you know, it's
right,
just some knickknack.
right.
And Lisa even doesn't see the value in it, but Deacon, he's trying. He actually, in that moment, for 2 years, he hasn't gotten anyone a gift. No one's had a
Yeah.
fucking gift. No one's had a fucking birthday or Christmas or anything in this world. For 2 years, he's forgotten how to even do anything but survive. And the theme of the game, the main theme, is not will he find Sarah? It's not love will endure. It's surviving isn't living.
Hmm.
That's the
Hmm.
difference. And that's what he realizes in that moment. Maybe not consciously, but
Hmm.
he's like, oh, this isn't about what does she need to survive? It's what does she need, or what can I provide her that will maybe make her life a little better? Not her
Yeah.
survival, but her life.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a distinction there, right? Between surviving and living. Yeah, that's a good thing that you point out there. I think just by discovering Lisa, that's a bit of a seed that gets planted in
Yes.
terms of Deacon's redemption arc, like you mentioned. And yeah, I don't think Deacon consciously knows it, but there's a reason that he goes to all the trouble he does to rescue Lisa,
Mm-hmm.
obviously. I would say Deacon's probably in a state of despair when we first enter the game or enter that point in his life.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't want it to admit that he's dealing with depression, but in that state of survival, he gives up, his morality just in order to keep himself alive. And I don't think that he knows really what he's living for. Um, Obviously, we know that it's to find his wife if she's alive or not, but he won't even admit that in the beginning of the game,
Right. And at the beginning, he has no reason to believe she would be alive.
right?
The only shred of hope he has is he
Mm-hmm.
hasn't found her body. But I
Yeah,
mean,
that's like
come
an
on.
absence of a
There's like,
negative. Like
there's
that's
like,
not.
there's not any reason. Everyone's fucking dead, dude. Like, she's not alive. Everybody knows it. Like, why? It's a miracle that he even has Boozer. Like,
Exactly.
everyone else in the game, no one else has someone that they knew from before. Everyone is a stranger. No
Good
one knew
point.
each other from before. They've all banded together in the after of this disaster.
Good point.
It's a miracle that he has Boozer, and then that fucking Jesse survived, Carlos. The three of them, I mean, they even say it in the game, like, what are the odds? What are the
Right.
chances? And then Sarah's also alive. Like, I guess I should, slight correction, Lisa and Tucker knew each other. They were neighbors.
They did, but I think we see a big distinction there between Tucker and Lisa's relationship. Like Tucker doesn't really she puts it off that like she cares about her for like 0.2 seconds, and then is
Yeah.
like, all right, whatever, f you.
Yeah,
Whereas
she's like,
Deacon,
oh, sweet girl. Remember me? We used to live down the street. Okay, here's a hoe. Get to work.
right? Yeah, yeah. I think Deacon cherishes and nourishes those other relationships a little bit more.
Right.
I mean, he even I think gives Carlos a chance to turn things around. Right? He doesn't condemn him right away.
Um, I don't know if it's so much of a chance to turn things around. But I think he sort of recognizes that it's too far gone. I think it's more a sort of chance to explain himself.
Ah, that's a good point. Yeah, yeah.
But definitely it's like you say, it's sort of Deacon realizing, oh, this is a person from my past.
Hmm.
He did used to be a person and not
Hmm.
just an enemy. Like most people in this world jump to us versus them. And Deacon is, because he's our main character, so he's the guy who we are going to explore this morality, this idea of humanity, this idea of can you regain what you have lost.
Hmm.
Whereas
Hmm.
the other characters support Deacon's journey through that exploration of that theme. So yeah, so it's kind of interesting how he gives Carlos Jesse a chance to at least explain himself. He's not going to let him go. He knows that Jesse isn't redeemable.
Hmm.
That he wasn't even when he got kicked out of the mongrels. Like from that point on, this guy is an asshole and doesn't deserve anything. But he still wants answers, which is different from, oh, that's the enemy, let's just kill him.
Absolutely. I think what Days Gone does really well is, in terms of a narrative piece, it allows us to see that world through Deacon's eyes. As you know, in storytelling, I feel like you have to have a character that the audience can relate to, or that the audience can have things explained to them
Mm-hmm.
by a certain character's perspective. But Days Gone almost puts us in the seat, or puts us alongside Deacon, who is the main character. So we do tend to bond with him. We do tend to, I don't know if I want to say like relate necessarily, but
Yeah, video games are kind of a different animal to movies. In movies, we know we're watching an external person. We're
Hmm.
watching a character's story. In video games, we are the character. We're in control like 99% of the time. It's
Yeah,
me that's running through the forest
yeah.
using the bull rush skill on the freaks to knock them to the ground and smashing their face in with the superior mace. That's me doing that. That's not Deacon. And then I'm
That's
like,
true.
remind myself, I'm not a psycho. I'm not actually doing those things. It's a video game, but it's not a choice that Deacon is making, whether to use the crossbow or the sniper rifle. It's I'm making that choice. So it does get a little muddied when you're playing a game where you're in control most of the time, but the narrative is in control of how things unfold, what the
Yeah, that.
story is. I'm not in control. It's not a decision tree story, which interestingly, Days Gone was originally going to be a decision tree
Mm,
where you would have different options that would affect the outcome at the end of the game. For example, whether or not Boozer survives.
wow.
I don't know. Actually, I don't know what else was going to be planned, but it was supposed to be a decision tree. I think killing Leon was a decision that you would
Mm.
face early on in the game, whether or not to execute him or leave him for the freaks, maybe. So
You got me hyped up for a B version of this game. I want to play that one too, just to compare, right?
right. I mean, that would be kind of cool. I think they nixed it because it was just getting too complicated.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I don't know how long you spent playing this game, your first playthrough. I put in like 90 to 100 hours on my first playthrough. I can't imagine having that much story be a decision tree, and you get to the end, and it's like, oh, I got the shit ending. Oh,
Right,
now I've got to
right.
go do it again. I would do it again because I fucking love the game, but I think a lot of people would be overwhelmed, like regular gamers, people who maybe want to move on to something else. People who are not sucked
Hmm.
in by it might be overwhelmed and think, well, I don't want to put in 100 hours
Right.
just to get a different ending. Like, I'll just look it up on YouTube.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think I spent about between 60 and 70 hours on my first playthrough there. I tried to do all the side quests and stuff too, but I guess maybe I just tried to fast travel a little too much. I didn't want to appreciate the scenery maybe as much as it deserves, but
Yeah, I mean, the story does grab you, and it does. You get to a certain point, probably about halfway through, and it's like I felt just compelled every day. I was like, I have to know what happens. I have to know.
right,
Is he going to find Sarah?
right.
Once he finds Sarah, are they going to fix their relationship? What is going to happen? How is this going to unfold? What is going to happen with the Colonel and the militia and Lost Lake? Are we going to save Lost Lake? What's like just everything? I'm just like, okay, what next? What next? What next? What next? It pulls you along, and you can't stop playing it.
Yeah, one of the things you brought up is that video games are a modality that do blur those lines between I'm playing the game versus the characters making these decisions.
Hmm.
I think that's what draws us in too, and I think that does say a lot about the appeal of the game. I think that's the hook, right? As we're playing the character 99% of the time, but when we have these narrative cutscenes, um, we see the character having their own dialogue and choices. But there is that connection that we have with the characters because we've been controlling them
Right.
for X number of hours. I think in terms of player base, how emotionally and mentally we get tied to the characters, I think that has a large part of it as well. I think we feel what the characters feel if we're
Hmm.
taking the game seriously.
Yeah,
Um,
empathy.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, it's empathy, and whether people know that that's what's going on, there's definitely been games that I've played and beaten and just felt so heavy afterward or felt so taxed
Yeah.
emotionally. And Days Gone, thankfully, I think it does end on a good note. Kind of has that happy upswing in the
Hmm.
last act. But I'm grateful for that because it helped me feel like an actual hero. It helped me remind me
Oh,
that I was playing a game, right?
yeah. Yeah. It's definitely a victory. And it's a
For sure.
victory not just for Deacon finding Sarah and defeating
Hmm.
the militia, killing Schizo.
Yeah.
It's a victory for Deacon's redemption. We know it's a deserved win. He's not, because right at the beginning, he's selling people to a slave camp, and he's almost. I mean, he's a drifter. It's like, is he a marauder? I mean, is he basically one step away from living in an ambush camp? Apart
Right.
from the fact that he just doesn't want to be around people, but
Yeah.
like him and Boozer could very easily slip and be bad guys. They're, they're not really good guys. Deacon's not really a good guy at the beginning.
No, he's an anti-hero, and I think he's a drifter, a vigilante, if you want to label him that. But we see that redemption arc, we see that change
Mm-hmm.
in his mannerisms, and I think that does have a lot to do with his own mental health. I think the fact that he finds his wife and they can make things work, like he's golden at that point, right? Like
Right.
as long as him and Sarah and Boozer are good, I don't know if there's anything else that could really touch him. I don't think he
Yeah.
is going to stress out about much else.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Sarah and Boozer. Let's get into their points of view and where
Yeah.
they're at.
So I guess Boozer seems to be the second introduced character. We'll touch on him first before we get to Sarah. But obviously, Boozer, as we find out, is dealing with the loss of his wife.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that took place before
Yes,
the
yeah,
world
that
went to
was
shit.
before everything collapsed. Mm-hmm.
We see him dealing with it through alcohol. I mean, that's where he gets his name from, right?
Right.
He masks his feelings by numbing them, and he even puts himself in life-threatening situations, similar to Deacon. I think that he feels responsible for his wife's death, or at least that he doesn't deserve to live if she's not alive.
Mm-hmm.
So he has a hard time coping with that loss. Obviously, she was very important to him. I might be generalizing a little too much, but given that he was in an MC, I don't know how open and vulnerable he is on the day to day. So I'd imagine his wife maybe is that one or two people that was able to help him feel safe and allow him to express himself emotionally, instead of keeping it all bottled up.
Yeah, he definitely seems like the guy who puts on a front.
Mm-hmm.
He's, tough guy. I mean, look at his tattoos. He's covered in tattoos. They're very artistic. But he has mayhem and vengeance on the sides of his head. Like,
Wow.
he's definitely has this spiky exterior of, I'm a fucking tough guy, just fucking try it. But when you see him with Deacon, they're brothers. He's almost not soft in like in a bad way, but like he
No.
has a friendship there and a brotherhood with Deke. And, he uses humor. He's a very humorous
Mm-hmm.
guy. He is very in touch with his emotions and very in touch with Deacon's emotions. But there's that pride and there's that, oh, I need to be masculine so I can't talk about it.
Yeah, when he's with Deacon and Sarah and the puppy,
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
we see the more well-rounded side of Boozman that, like you said, he puts on that spiky exterior, which I would say it's a role that he plays very intentionally. But let me ask you, why do you think he puts on such a tough exterior? What purpose does that serve for him?
I mean, I think it's just his place in the world, the way he, again, the way he survives. I mean, he's the enforcer for the MC, so like that's his job, is to be
Mm-hmm.
the tough guy. And I think it's probably, I get the impression, and I mean, this is just pure projection. I don't know, this isn't said in the game, but he seems like someone who that's just always been the way he's learned from his experiences that he will come out on top if he is the tough guy.
Yep.
That,
Yeah.
if he shows emotions, he's not gonna get what he wants, or it's not gonna go well. The best course of action is to hide your emotions and to be a tough guy. And that's how you survive.
Yeah, I think it's okay to project a little bit. Like I said, people tend to fall into sometimes similar categories in terms of our behaviors, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're not always as unique as we would like to think we are, but
Right.
yeah, I would imagine there's a hurt or scared little boy inside a Boozer somewhere that he has to protect with his big muscles and tattoos and his role as an enforcer. Like, that's scary. Just the word itself, you're like, oh my god, don't mess with that guy.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the first impression when you first see him, it's like, oh, geez, I wouldn't want to be on the wrong side of that guy. Because
Sure.
he's big, he's intimidating, he's tattooed, his clothes, he's got all the patches and everything, and it's like, ooh, yeah, scary man. But then you get to know him in the game, and it's like, oh, he's a really cool dude. I mean, I
Hmm.
think most people who play the game really fucking love Boozer. I've asked a lot of people like who their favorite character is, and they all say Boozer, or a lot of people say Boozer. And it's my first impression was that it was all front. And I
Uh-huh.
didn't see beyond it a little bit. My first playthrough, shame on me for not seeing it. But now I see it and I'm like, oh yeah, he's a really fucking cool dude. I would love to sit down and have a beer with him. Or just hang out with him, or just, be friends with him. Have the relationship that Sarah has with him. Like, he is a real brother kind of
Hmm.
figure, but he comes across He presents himself as a tough motherfucker that you don't want to mess with. And he does that on purpose.
Absolutely. And I have to comment, because I know the game when it was released did not get the most favorable reviews, and I could see where he would appear to be a one-dimensional character right off the bat. But
Right.
this game, it grows on you like a relationship. The more time you spend with it, it evolves. It becomes something that's layered like an onion, right?
Yeah,
It has
yeah.
multiple aspects to it.
For example, I mean, Boozer's whole thing with the burn on his arm, and at the beginning it's
Uh-huh.
like, oh, it's fine. I just need a couple days. I'll be fine. I'll be fine. It's okay. I don't need any of that lavender salve. Like, I'm fine.
He
He
can't
hides it.
admit hurt.
Yeah, yeah. He can't admit weakness and
Hmm.
pain.
Hmm.
And then that as a story, like that. Okay, sure. If you just take that scene. Or that you play it for like 5 hours and you get to that bit and you're like, oh, this guy is so like one dimensional. But the whole point of the story is that it's setting up potential to lose himself
Hmm.
and be lost by the world, and lose himself in his own insecurities and his own like not allow himself to be saved. When you get to Lost Lake and he has his arm amputated and he's at the farm and you have that one mission where you have to go talk to him and it's literally he doesn't even want to
Yeah.
talk to you.
Yeah.
And everyone is like, a lot of people play that and they're like, what the fuck is this bullshit mission where you just go talk to him and he's like, yeah, whatever. And that's it, mission done? Like, what the
Hmm.
fuck? But that's the point of the story is Boozer is losing himself. He becomes suicidal. He gets drunk and goes wandering out in the shit.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's the screamer is introduced and you get chased by the horde. Like he is actively trying to kill himself. Or at least allow himself to be murdered by the world.
Yeah, I would definitely say there's a suicidal intention there, but I think he has too much pride to actively take his own life,
Right, yeah. It's
by an
like
easier means.
I will put myself in the most danger possible so that the world will kill me.
Yep. Yeah. And, what brings him to that point? Well, we know, like I said, he lost his wife. He and Deacon still wear their colors, so there's still an identity that they're holding
Hmm.
on to. They still have that brotherhood. Um, remind me, does he get into this suicidal mind state after he's lost his arm?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes. It's after.
that good. That plays into what I was gonna say is that after he loses his arm, he can't ride anymore.
Hmm.
He has difficulty managing a weapon, so he can't defend himself. So that we see
Right.
some of that weakness creep in.
Yeah, I mean, the game unlocks Boozer's shotgun
Hmm.
after he loses his arm because he can't use it anymore.
Clever, clever, clever.
Hmm.
So we see in terms of people's mental health and identity is so important. We need to know why, maybe not have all the answers, but we need to know why we're here and what purpose we serve. How am I useful? I
Right.
think people need to feel like they're here for a reason, if I can say that, whether it's big or small. We have to know somebody else maybe depends on us or something needs us.
Yeah, I mean, Boozer's whole identity is enforcer, tough guy.
Yep.
And like,
Yep.
oh shit, you can't ride, you can't be an enforcer, you can't be a tough guy. I mean, I just think, like, even for someone like me, I don't consider myself a tough person at all. If I lost my arm is not really part of my
Mm,
identity necessarily. I could still write without my arm, I could still do the podcast without an arm, but I would feel self-conscious. I
yeah.
would feel
Yep.
damaged. I would just feel weird and vulnerable. And that's just, me, a normal person. Whereas Boozer, it's like you say, it's tied to his identity in so many different ways. So many parts of him can no longer function. He can't ride. He can't hold a gun. He can't be physically intimidating. And he has that stupid little prosthetic thing until he gets the knife. But it's just like, oh, it just seems so. I can see why he sees it as being so sad.
Right, right. And we see him recover, if I can say that. I think he doesn't get rid of the things that have happened or the loss of his arm, but we see that he as a person grows,
Mm.
which diminishes the negative impact of what's happened to him. So we see him start to recover, of course, once he finds something worth living for, which is a puppy, all right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people in modern day or regular life get pets and sometimes have kids as a way of giving their life meaning and purpose. It gives us something to care for. It's fulfilling for us to help something else grow, right?
Hmm.
But grief is probably the defining characteristic of this character, if I can say that. I think that's what takes its heaviest toll on him. And if I may, I think I'm stealing this from a TV show I watched. I can't remember exactly, but I like to define grief as love persisting. It never really goes away or gets smaller, but when we have something that allows us to continue growing, the hole in our heart seems to have less of a detrimental impact because we have more to us. So eventually, Boozman can make light of his lost arm. He cracks jokes in a self-deprecating way.
He has a lot of funny one-liners.
He does. Yeah, I think healthy humor definitely heals, but we have to get ourselves to that place first.
That's all we have time for this week. We will break down the rest of the characters and our own chances of survival in a Days Gone world in part 2 next week. Okay, a couple things before we wrap up. You can support the Days Gone podcast via buymeacoffee.com/daysgonepod, where you can throw a little money in the tip jar if you're feeling generous. That really helps me with the overhead costs of running the show. And I want to say a big thank you to Basics of Pain for buying me coffee this week. You are a fucking rock star, and I appreciate the support so very much. You can also support the podcast by simply leaving a review on Spotify or whatever app you listen to us on. Also, subscribe and give us a thumbs up on YouTube. That helps the algorithm do its thing, so more people can find the show. You can email me your thoughts, comments, opinions, and counter-arguments at daysgonepod@gmail.com. You can also find me moderating the Days Gone subreddit. Thanks for listening. Weaver out.